Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of our Stacks Town Hall. There has been a number of exciting announcements, milestones, and releases here in the Stacks ecosystem and for the greater Bitcoin industry over the last few weeks. Withdrawals for SBTC opened flawlessly. We saw the release of multiple roadmaps from the technical side to the DeFi side of the ecosystem. We saw a deeper dive into the future work of Stacks and SBTC, known as currently the Satoshi upgrade. And of course, only a few days ago, SBTC blew through its third cap of welcoming in more than 2,000 new BTC into the ecosystem in under a few hours, bringing the total value of Bitcoin in the system here within Stacks to over $500 million. But today, we brought you all back to talk about what's coming next and how to make things even better. While many of you are live, including myself, here in Las Vegas for Bitcoin 2025, we couldn't think of a better way to provide you with all these exciting announcements. And a warm welcome to everybody across the world, wherever you may be tuning in. The ecosystem is in an exciting period of transition from one that has prioritized robust technology above all else to one that is elevating growth to the top tier of its next chapter. In just a moment, we're going to hear from several builders and key contributors that have been working on the next question and the next natural progression of where roadmaps and what advancements come for the Stacks ecosystem. Thinking, how can we accelerate Stacks and ascend to a top 10 protocol and be the one and only hub for the Bitcoin ecosystem? In today's sessions, you will hear about a proposal that is currently in draft status, as well as a number of perspectives from those who helped write it and others who have helped provide core feedback to this point today. There's a good amount of material that we're going to get through today. So we've scheduled this community-wide Q&A session and town hall to discuss all of it with you, and the Q&A session to follow directly if you have any questions. And we're looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Again, this is a draft which will be posted shortly on the forums for comment, and we welcome feedback from each and every one of you if you're not able to make the session later post the town hall. With that said, everybody, welcome to this special edition of the Stacks Town Hall. To you and all of you in Vegas, welcome. And last but not least, Mitchell, over to you. Let's kick it off.
Thanks, Kyle. Good to see you. Honored to be here this morning with Munib, Tico, and Alex. Live from Vegas, at least some of us. Alex, a little bummed you're not here.
Yeah.
So let's get right into this. For those who maybe don't know you, let's do super quick intros. I think you guys are pretty famous in Stacks world, so let's make that quick. And then I've got a number of questions for all of you. Munib, we'll start with you.
Everyone, Munib, co-founder of Stacks, and I work at Trust Machines in the ecosystem.
Tico, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Tycho, or Tico, some say. I'm co-founder of Zest Protocol, right? The lending protocol on Stacks, the largest DeFi protocol by TVL, and also contributor to Stacking DAO, the liquid staking solution on Stacks, and generally very excited about Stacks DeFi and Bitcoin DeFi.
Awesome. Alex.
Alex Miller. I run Hero, the dev tools company for the Stacks ecosystem, and proud degenerate user of Stacks DeFi, including Stacks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. And I'm Mitchell, interim executive director at the Stacks Foundation, and somewhat of an OG around here. So I'm excited to talk about this next chapter in Stacks with all of you. Tycho, I'm going to just keep going back and forth between Tycho and Tico just to keep you on your toes. We're actually going to go to you first for a question. So I'd sort of like to frame this up as what we're all doing here, and maybe start with the question of, how does Stacks go from where we are today to a top 10 ecosystem and really the primary home of the Bitcoin economy? We'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's kind of like, two things that are required for that, right? And the first thing, most obvious, obviously the tech, right? Like being a Bitcoin layer 2, right? Or Bitcoin layer that has Bitcoin finality, right? That has BTC on the chain, right? With SBTC, that sort of seamless, most secure, fastest, bridging experience that's live now. So, the tech is the most important part, right? And that's kind of where Stacks has really gone from 0 to 1. Right? It's done things that no one thought was possible. It's done things that no one has done before. But I would say after that, then the second step is obviously to drive adoption, right? And to bring that basically from 1 to n, right? Or 1 to 100. And that's something that many ecosystems have kind of done before us, right? It's like a combination of like attracting builders, like creating the incentives, bringing like capital on chain, right? So obviously you need the tech infrastructure, but you also need the capital infrastructure, right? And the liquidity to make this usable, right? To make people, to make it possible for capital to flow through this technology. And yeah, that's really what's next for Stacks in my view.
So in one word, you might say growth, traction or so. Okay.
Yeah,
Alex,
exactly.
Awesome. Alex, many further thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, I think this Tycho did a good job describing it, right? Like I feel like when Nakamoto went live and SBTC went live, like I had that moment personally when I was using the tech and SBTC transfers would just go through within seconds, and that was the best Bitcoin UX experience I've had in 12 plus years in the Bitcoin industry. And that gives you the idea that the tech is there. I would point out that I am personally extremely excited about the new upgrade that we are dubbing Satoshi upgrades right now. The self-custodial minting of Bitcoin is huge, both for individual holders and also for large institutions. And also, I think that positions us not as the home of just Bitcoin DeFi, but just pure Bitcoin usage. Could be payments, could be anything. It's the fastest, best, most secure rails. And if it's self-custodial, that means people can just move their Bitcoin there. So if the tech is heading in that great of a direction, I do think it needs to be equally matched by the focus on growth and branding and capital markets and marketing. And like we hear in the community all the time, like, hey, Stacks needs a CMO. And there are many asks that come. And I think that's the area where I could describe it really well. 0 to 1 is the technology that you didn't think it was possible, but now we need to reach like a global audience and have like aggressive growth.
Absolutely. I love that all around the ecosystem in different ways, you can see that notion of traction being elevated as high as historically Blockstack and then Stacks has held technology. Let's move on to the next question. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the things you raised, Manib, but as we're framing up ultimately what we're going to get into with the proposal, I think it's helpful to not only say where we're going, which we've covered just a little bit, and we'll get into with some of the roadmap conversations over the coming week, but let's also talk about some of the pain points as well, because from my understanding, a lot of the SIP, and I'm honored to have become part of an author on this SIP, a lot of the pieces that ultimately are in this proposal are derived directly from some of these pain points. I've got a whole section on some of those pain points later, so I'll stay quiet on this one, but I'd love to hear from each of you fairly quickly on this one. What are some of the pain points that we're basically here to solve today with this proposal?
I mean, I'll start there for anyone who watched kind of the testimony that I gave to Congress a few weeks ago, which total life bucket list item. That was awesome. But, it's absolutely crazy. As you heard me saying, this is not a joke. We raised $15 million in that Reg A that we did. And I'm still very proud that we did that. I think it was important that we did that. But the overhead of the compliance we had to do and the decentralization has cost us far more than the amount that we raised there. And I think you see it reflected in a lot of ways. I think one thing when you talk to people a lot, you'll hear something like Stacks needs to run more like a startup, right? It needs to move a little bit quicker. It needs to have that more of that. Again, we'll always come back to the growth focus thing. And I think just a lot of pain point of not being sure of who could work on something, who is responsible for it. Can anyone work on a lot of these things like liquidity operations or certain types of marketing that no one's been comfortable to do, and finding a way to be able to do those things. Because look, at the end of the day, I think we're a very mission-driven ecosystem. But if we can't get word out and we can't get on the users that everybody needs, we can't create this global Bitcoin economy. We can't quite literally change the fucking world if we're not able to bring everyone in. And so to me, that's the number one pain point that we have to go after.
Well said. Thoughts from you, Tico?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo like a lot of that. I mean, maybe to sort of frame it from the builder experience, right? I guess like, the sort of, if you look at all of Stacks DeFi today, like it's all unincentivized, right? It's basically there's 100 million TPL. It's come from users, right? From our friends on Twitter, right? The people in the trenches, and and that's great, right? That's really amazing. But in terms of pain points, like if you look at other ecosystems, right? Like the ability to sort of grow capital, right? To bring stablecoin capital on chain, right? That's probably the most important thing for Zest to grow, right? To have that kind of, have a lot of USDC, USDT, or other stables that people can borrow against their BTC, and then actually, make use of all the great infra that we've built, at scale, right? That's like a pain point to some extent, right? Because if we look at, other ecosystems that have kind of gone before us, they would spend like, 50, 60, 70 million dollars, right, a year on bringing this capital, right, to sort of like bring it into the DeFi apps on their chains, right? And then you get that sort of bootstrapping growth, you get that initial flywheel, and then it sort of starts coming and it becomes sticky, right? And then you kind of get to where Solana is today, right? Or where Ethereum mainnet is today. And it's been like, that's probably like the main pain point for DeFi builders today, right? To not have that kind of, war chest essentially to bootstrap a very liquid ecosystem.
Absolutely. It makes you think, what will we see once we do, right? Once we give deeper incentives to some of these protocols and applications. Mooney, before we wrap this one up, I want to hear from you. I know you've experienced some pain points along the way as well.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both Alex and Tycho on what they've mentioned. And I think maybe I'll give a little bit of an historic context here as well, right? So because we did the SEC qualified offering, there was because the regulators wouldn't explicitly tell you anything, right? But there was pressure on us to have a very small initial treasury, like literally, right? Like one of the biggest reasons for having a small treasury that then results into all of these other downstream effects, that there aren't incentives for developers, or there isn't a large ecosystem fund that can invest and incubate these things. And secondly, I think as Alex said, the SEC offering did define a lot of the day-to-day functioning of the ecosystem, where they're completely independent entities. They have their own legal teams, finance teams, right? Like there's a lot of, like, I would say, overhead, right? So we are strong on technology. I think we're strong on being mission driven. We're very strong on decentralization. Even on this call, like everyone's in a different entity and right, totally independent. But there are areas where either we have no presence, like, token marketing, certain growth initiatives, or capital markets, like these other ecosystems. They have very active capital markets program, and they engage with capital markets, and we've traditionally have never done it. Or even if that functionality exists, there is a ton of overhead there, right? Decentralization is good for a lot of things, but it's not a solution for everything. I think you can have operational efficiency and decentralization at the same time, and I think we were scoring very low on operational efficiency, and that just hits you day to day.
Yeah. That's a great segue into my next question, where I think we're going to really get into the nuts and bolts of what's being proposed here. But just to pause for the audience real quick, what we've done here is we've framed up really the big picture. What are some of the things that Stacks can do to win in 2025 and beyond? We've touched briefly on some of the pain points which we're trying to solve for. We'll get into that a little bit more later in my session. And I also want to remind folks that just last week, the Stacks roadmap was updated in a major way. Many thanks to the community members and the builders and everyone who spent long hours on sessions helping to dial those in. If you haven't seen it yet, stacks.co/roadmap. You'll also find the Satoshi upgrades, which Manib mentioned, and I'm sure we'll be able to cover more in the future. DeFi growth plans were in there, plans on how Stacks can accumulate more value accrual to the chain through future upgrades and dual stacking and all kinds of exciting things. We're not going to go super deep on those today, but I want to remind everyone, if you haven't seen those are a really great way to, in addition to what these guys have said today, to dive into where Stacks is going, what's in front of us to build, even on the growth side, right? Again, that growth side is getting elevated alongside the technology. So the roadmap has a whole section on growth. All right, go check that out after this. Alex, I'm going to come to you next. I would love to know what exactly is being proposed here. I've heard there's a SIP. I helped write that SIP.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about it.
All right, let's talk through it, because I have been reading through it all. I've obviously been talking to people through the process. So dropping today, as I understand it, I think, Mitchell, right after this call, I've been told it's going to go out, is SIP 31. And the entire idea is, how does Stacks become a top 10 ecosystem? I will just say for myself, the reason I'm excited about this is I kind of have no interest in working in a second place ecosystem thing. And I think when I talk to builders, when I talk to people here, the message I kind of hear from everyone is like, it's go big or go home, man. Like, again, we're mission driven. We're trying to like create this global Bitcoin economy. Either we're going after it or we're not. And so I think, as you've heard from the pain points that's being discussed, there's two things that need to happen for that. Number one is streamlining the operations of the ecosystem. And I want to be very clear, that does not mean moving away at all from decentralized governance or the open source nature of this ecosystem. And I think there's a section to talk about that in a lot more detail later. But it's about streamlining the day-to-day operations, which is someone who runs one of the largest companies in the ecosystem. I totally feel that pain point on it. And the second is, how do we pull the resources together to actually do that? Because if you go around and you look at the other top 10, top 20 ecosystems, they have very large amounts of resources to work with. And as Tika was saying, like, we need to have those resources on the incentivization side, on the marketing side, even on the core dev, and frankly, especially the security side, right? Like, good security in crypto is expensive and requires a lot to do. So you've got a SIP coming out, and it proposes two main things. Number one is the creation of a new, kind of two new entities. One that's called the Stacks Endowment, and manages kind of the treasury and make sure that there's sufficient resources on an ongoing basis for the ecosystem. And the second one that's like a new operational entity. And that brings in core protocol development, and both the product and engineering, because treating the core protocol more like a product is really important. It brings in marketing, a Stacks CMO, token marketing. It brings in investor relations. It brings in all of these elements that we've talked about wanting as an ecosystem. And you go around and when I talk to you guys, when I talk to builders, I hear wanting, and it puts it inside a single organization who can focus on a lot of that day-to-day execution and work really well together. While, again, at the same time, there's two things that are really important. One, governance remains the exact same. The SIP process remains the same. The Stacks Foundation remains a check on all of this by being responsible for running the SIP process and providing that. Everything is still controlled by the community. It's still open source, so anyone can still contribute to the core code base and participate, and I think certainly still will. For instance, Hero is not part of this. Hero's staying an independent entity. We're going to contribute some of the initial resources and tokens to it, but we're staying independent to keep building dev tools. But it's really important that we have someone who is sitting there every day and saying, okay, what do we do to make the protocol better? What do we do to make sure that we have new people coming in and they're not having to work across different things, even if they are still very ultimately responsible to the entire community for it? So that's kind of the streamlining. That's how it works. Again, you'll see this work really well. There's a lot of elements, I think, that the builders and the folks working on this SIP, as I read through it, pulled from what we've seen in other ecosystems like Solana. Obviously, they're kind of the go-to example, but also just kind of from tech companies and things and the way you build technology well as a giant open source ecosystem more broadly. And so the second question then is, great, how do we actually fund this and make it happen? And the answer is to build what's been coined the new Stacks endowment. And I think the entire idea behind that is great. Let's increase emissions by not too much, actually. It increases emissions basically from like currently emissions each year from POX are 3.5%. This would boost it to about 5.75% for 5 years. All of those tokens flow into this endowment, which manages it well, manages it for the long term, and provides the resources for DeFi growth incentives, for marketing, for core protocol development, to really push us forward and make us into a top 10 ecosystem, to make sure that we remain and grow as the home of the Bitcoin economy. And just set us up for the future to be able to keep doing this. So it's absolutely going to be a big investment for us. But I think, again, if we're not looking to grow this ecosystem 100x, and we're not looking to quite literally like take over the world economy with it, like what are we, what else are we doing here? So Mitchell, let me know if you want to dive into a little more detail on exactly it. I guess the other thing I'll say is, in terms of how this is all managed, there's a lot of details in the SIP as I've read through. And I've spent a lot of time in both the nonprofit world and the for-profit world, and like reading through the SIP, what I get is a lot of best practices of how you do governance and management, right? Again, streamlining it so there's like this treasury committee that oversees all of the day-to-day operations and makes sure the staff is doing the right thing, but still that is like directly answerable to the community. So the community doesn't have to vote on everything because that would obviously be very hard, but they're directly responsible to them. They're talking to them. They're making sure that the will of the community is enacted every day, and that all of these resources are being used well and with very transparent and clear reporting to everyone.
Great, Alex. It's a really great start. And I will ask a few questions to dive a little deeper and sort of channel what I think some of the questions from the community will be. And quick reminder, we'll have a Q&A right after this in case I miss anything that you guys want to hear more about. So you mentioned two things. Number one, streamlining. Number two, treasury, or endowment rather. In the first bucket, tell us a little bit more about how this impacts maybe some of the organizations that people are frequently sort of exposed to in the ecosystem relative to key contributors, Stacks Foundation, Hero, maybe Trust Machines. We've got Munib on. Talk to us a little bit about that. What might be changing? What isn't changing? You mentioned Hero. Just take us one level deeper there if you can.
Yeah. So I think the two orgs that I think things changed the most for a bit are Bitcoin L2 Labs, because obviously Bitcoin L2 Labs works very heavily just on core development right now, and all this would be moving into there. The second one is Stacks Foundation, which has a very wide mandate right now. But if you think about what the purpose of a foundation really should be, it's making sure the will of the community is reflected and like running the governance process. So this will allow Stacks Foundation to focus on that governance while moving all of kind of like the marketing and growth and operations into this new operational entity. So they will do marketing, like I said, DevRel, builder growth, DeFi incentives, just all that whole realm of things where you want to have everything like very well integrated with each other. Because when you I'm gonna use a corporate word. I'm gonna say when you do it synergistically, right? It just like works a
Oh
little
boy.
better.
I'll let you get away with it, but that's the last one.
I had to drop it once.
All right.
Who this doesn't change things for, like I said, is so Hero is going to remain independent as a dev tooling company. Like that's what we do. That's where we're focused on it. I know Trust Machines from talking to Munib is going to keep building, investing in incubating applications and building their own applications on the network, what they've been doing for the last few years. The Bitcoin Frontier Fund, formerly Stacks Accelerator, is going to keep doing what they do on it. And then I think other orgs in the ecosystem, like the Stacks Asia Foundation, where there's an advantage to, again, kind of because of like a very specific focus they have, they'll be able to keep operating independently, doing what they want to do. but make use of some of these kind of like shared back office resources so that we don't have to have like 10 different HR departments, right? Because like if you're a 5-person organ, like, you shouldn't have to have a lot of that own infrastructure on your own, and we can really streamline things and make it easier for people to focus on like their core mission and not the overhead.
Great. I'm going to stick with you just a little bit longer. It sounds
Yeah.
like there's a number of new things that this operational entity will likely take on. I think we'll come back to that in just a minute because those are particularly exciting to me. A lot of those things that have been needed for a while. So we'll table that for a second. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how the endowment itself is actually created. What are the mechanisms by which that will come to be? And is that over a long period of time?
Sure.
Talk to me about that.
So it's built up over about a 5-year period total. There's an initial mint of 100 million tokens, and those tokens are used. You'll see the phrase working capital. What working capital means is those are things that are like deployed into DeFi, invested into funds, very specifically not brought onto the open market. And this is obviously one thing that's really important when we're talking to people is you want to provide stability for all of the ecosystem participants. And so there's also this whole economic report that was commissioned that reviewed exactly how to do that, how to do this very responsibly. That's linked from the SIP, so you can see that and the recommendations that are going to be followed from that. So you've kind of got that upfront working capital that's made so that you can do DeFi deployments and investments in things. And then you have over the next 5 years, just as I said, this increase in emissions from about 3.5 to 5.75% that builds up the rest of the treasury, that provides all of the funds that you need to actually employ people to bring it to market, to do some kind of private OTC sales, to again convert the STX into like dollar capital and Bitcoin, so that they have the funds to work, but again, so that those are not all hitting the market at one point. We absolutely know how important that is on it. And again, this is all managed by a very professional team at something called the Stacks Endowment. You hiring a chief investment officer, having it overseen by a treasury committee. And again, you'll see this model used anywhere from like giant universities, right, where they have these massive endowments that let them run kind of indefinitely, to lots of other crypto ecosystems. So there's a lot of really good best practices to follow here that I think you see reflected in the SIP as I read through it.
Yeah, one of the things that's exciting to me personally is I think that the decentralization was necessary, made a lot of sense at the time, with respect to both decision making and the treasuries. But that also meant that Stacks wasn't really able to benefit from, I just will call it, economies of scale with treasury management, right? We were all doing our separate things, and there was never really any single big pile of capital that you could use in the way that you're describing to grow over many years and to make longer term investments and things. So that's particularly exciting for me. All right, I'll give you a little break, Alex. Thank you for that pretty good overview of the SIP so far. Tico, I'm going to turn to you. I think that the builder perspective here is obviously really key. And so I'd like to hear from you. You're one of the authors of the SIP. There's a whole section there sort of describing how this endowment should be spent. Talk us through some of that stuff, those categories, maybe the things you're the most excited about, or anything else you think people should know with regards to the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, this will be, a big discussion. We'll put this on the forum. It's all going to be out there, right? Like for everyone to read and obviously most importantly to vote on, right? Because that's what a SIP is about. But yeah, I would underline that like most of the capital, right, that's sort of proposed to be brought into the ecosystem, is like more than 50%, right, is allocated to growth initiatives, right? So not necessarily operations, right? That's very, very lean, right? I mean, Stacks sort of have a history of operating, very, very leanly on operations, right? If you look at some other ecosystems where you hear, oh yeah, at our labs entity, we have 300 people working there, like that's not Stack. So that lesson is learned, and that will be carried forward, right, into this SIP, or it's kind of based on that experience. but yeah, most of it goes into like, DeFi growth, right? Bringing capital on chain, right? Bringing those stable coins on chain, making sure that we can have deep DEX liquidity so people can trade on chain, right? That means that they can then also borrow on chain more because more can be liquidated on chain, and just, that generates fees, that generates TVL. That's basically what, makes stacks go up, right? Or makes stacks be a bigger ecosystem, right?
Absolutely.
But also to put it bluntly like that. So yeah, that's what the proposal is about. That's what it's proposing to mostly allocate to, right? To really build that on-chain economy.
Perfect. All right. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left here. So I've got a few more questions. So we'll sort of move rapid fire. I'll let anyone jump in that's ready and willing. So there's a new endowment, potentially. There's these emissions. Who's in control of all that? Like, how does that work? Alex, Manib, Tico, take your own swing at it. You've all helped write the paper in some ways, so I'd love to hear more a little about that. Is this just a small group? Is this governed by the SIP process?
Yeah. So
I can chime in a little bit at a high level, and then I'll let Alex dive into the details. Also, Mitchell, I think we got some more time, so this timer is a little outdated.
All right.
We can go over a little bit. All right. So I think the way to think about this is that we already have decentralization, and the Stacks Foundation is now even narrowing down focus on governance. And there's a reason why in the SIP, the endowment is separate from the operational entity, right? So the endowment is where the capital is, and it has, in the SIP, you'll see the proposal for how, there's a treasury committee and like how checks and balances work. But the operational entity only gets a budget for a year, right? And none of these structures have any shareholders. So no one is personally benefiting from this, right? There are no shareholders. They're only here for the public good, for the good of the ecosystem, and they have a clear agenda. You can look at the sort of like the distribution of, the initial allocation of capital, like where the capital is going and how people are going to come in and use it. So I think one point that I want to touch upon before I hand over to Alex is that if you look at it, everyone's like, oh, this is so amazing. Like, this is exciting. What are the potential downsides? And I think it's important to sort of like look at that what are the potential downsides and how we are being thoughtful. So I think let's look at this. So on the operational entity, the potential downside could be that, hey, look, this is a decentralized ecosystem, and are you potentially getting too centralized now? So I think we're being very careful about it. A lot of the existing entities remain there. The governance remains with the Stacks Foundation. The SIP process remains unchanged. People can propose new SIPs and take it through. So we maintain, I think we were very healthy on decentralization, and we are maintaining that. And we are being very thoughtful that if a new entity comes in that is a major contributor to certain things, it is not negatively impacting us on decentralization. Decentralized doesn't mean disorganized, right? We can be very operationally efficient in certain areas and bootstrap new areas where the ecosystem, there was no entity in the ecosystem that was actually doing work there, right? So it was just the empty seed. And I think this new entity can come in and just be very targeted in those areas. So as far as we are careful about decentralization governance and preserving it, I think there isn't a downside. And then on the second side, on the endowment, with these increased sort of like emissions, the potential downside could be that someone might think that, oh, some STX are now going to be dumped on the market or whatever, to be very blunt, right? And again, you'll see that the SIP is like very, very careful about these things. So the initial mint, the plan there is for the endowment to actually bring in institutional capital, institutional investors who can have lockups for years and years, 2 to 4 years, to have some initial dollars that the endowment can use. And then I actually think that getting these institutional investors is a huge plus point for the ecosystem. Because these people don't just come in and buy STX, and because they are now locked for 2 to 4 years, they have a vested interest in the success of the ecosystem. They actually come and deploy capital on chain. They actually come in and invest in protocols like Zest and Bitflow and others, because now they're in the ecosystem, right? And so it explicitly calls out that these tokens are not hitting the markets. They're either going to institutional investors or just deployed on chain into DeFi, right? So those are the negative things, and if you're being very thoughtful about it, you can actually benefit from all the positive stuff while sort of like avoiding any negative outcomes.
Some great points, and you actually hit on one of my next questions, was really like, how are you guys thinking about the tension, if at all, between centralization or lack of decentralization rather in some of these proposals? So I think you answered that well. Alex or Tico, other thoughts on the same?
Yeah, I think, fundamentally, like centralization, when you're talking about decentralization stuff, it's about who has like ultimate authority, right? And again, we're an open source ecosystem. We have the SIP process. It comes back to there. But streamlining like day-to-day operations, I think, doesn't do that, especially if you're thoughtful. And so again, I'm not going to try and like lay out everything as I read through the SIP and like what's in there with the detail of exactly how the orgs interact. They're there. But I think the key thing is you have these people with very distinct responsibilities who all have checks against each other. So you've got the Stacks Foundation overseeing the governance process. You have the Stacks Endowment who oversees, the management of the treasury and making sure it's being used responsibly and is reporting back on that both to the committee of people who, are initially like appointed by the community. And then also, just in public reporting to the community so they can see these things. Then you have this operational entity who everyone can keep an eye on. Plus, you have the other folks in the ecosystem. So it streamlines things really, really well. But yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, this is a public blockchain that is voted on by the members who are the people who are the members of the community on it. And that, it kind of all comes back to what they want.
Absolutely. Well said. All right, so we've just got a couple minutes now. I want to dive in, and I'm gonna be the first to answer my own question on this one. But I'll just ask it directly. Sort of what's in it for builders? What's in it for the community? I think maybe through some of the things you said today, that's fairly obvious. But let's spell it out. I think there's a lot of good and interesting things. One of the top things here on my list is the idea of a Stack CMO, having a more centralized marketing strategy that isn't limited to these different areas. So I'll put that one down for now, but I'm gonna have some more time later, so I'll cover those. Let's start with you, Tico. What are some of the, beyond the obvious, maybe even since you've mentioned DeFi incentives and some of that, what are the benefits that you see for users, the community, for builders, should this SIP be approved?
Yeah, I mean, should this SIP be approved? I would say everything would change, right? And I think also very important maybe to bear in mind is that this has been done before, right? Other ecosystems have done this kind of thing before. Most notably, Sonic, right? They rebranded from Phantom to Sonic. I think they had some sort of similar percentage. I think an increase of emissions of 3% for the next 5 years. With a really clear focus on DeFi. And then boom, right? 2 to 3 months later, Sonic is at 1 billion TVL, right? And it's one of the top ecosystems, and it's really going for it. Now, of course, the question there is like, getting to 1 billion TVL can be easy. Can you stay there, right? And I think we've taken some very clear, or I've taken some very clear learnings from my time in DeFi of like how that can be done, right? And how like seen the mistakes from before us, and yeah. So this is not the hard part, right? The hard part has already been done in terms of shipping the tech, right? And this is the the question of going from 1 to 100, right? 0 to 1, we already did. So, and yeah, if that's approved, then we can really hit full steam, which is kind of the thing that we've wanted to do for a long time.
You're getting me pumped, Tycho. Stop. Thank you. So before we wrap up, I want to mention some of what the next steps will be in this process. Number one, obviously, this is being shared in a draft state. It is public and visible on the forum as of now. There will be some other steps that SIP calls for. Treasury appointment committees being formed, comment and review period. We would like to move this fairly quickly. So the next 1 to 2 weeks we'll do for the feedback, integrating a lot of that feedback, further discussions with community, starting with the Q&A right after this. And then somewhere in that process in the next couple of weeks, we'll establish a voting timeline, assuming that all the feedback is integrated and overcome and so forth. So those are really the main things. Before I get you guys out of here and get to my next conversation with more builders, any last thoughts or things you think people should know?
I think my last thought is really that the Stacks ecosystem is getting ready to hit it out of the park. Right. We have a roadmap. We have the technical breakthroughs for self-custodial Bitcoin and other consensus changes, And we have shown enough traction that this is where infusion of capital with the right structure can just mean that there's insane growth. And I think I'm really, really excited about that. I think we're just entering a completely different era.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I mean, I'm just excited to go after the big thing. Like I've believed in this ecosystem for a long time. I've seen amazing stuff get built here, and we've outlasted, I think, like everyone else who claims to be building on Bitcoin in a way that we're not. And I'm excited to take it to the next level.
Tico, last but not least.
Yeah, I think everything has been said. I mean, we'll talk much more about this in the coming weeks, right? I mean, voting is open for a while, and we'll have little discussions about it, and get everyone involved. And but yeah, this is it.
All right. Thank you all for the time. Thank you for all the contributions to the paper and for sharing with all of us a little bit more. We'll get on to the next sessions, but we'll see you on the Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, look at this. Some of my in the trenches ecosystem friends here. All right, well, guys, let's keep it moving. I would love for you to do quick. Actually, you know what? I'm going to try to do your intros for you because I've known each of you quite a while. So we've got Andre. He's now at Bitcoin L2 Labs, formerly of CityCoins fame. We've got Setzeus here, currently of SetDev, but contributed all over the ecosystem. World famous Badger crew from back in the day. And then Leo, our stacking DAO, and I've seen you all over the ecosystem of late as well. I hope that's good for you guys. Really appreciate the time. I hope to see some of you in Vegas. You all just heard from Manib and Alex, kind of a high level overview of what's being proposed. And so I'm a little excited, so I'll try not to move too fast through these questions. But I'd love to kind of get a different perspective on some of these things from some of the folks who are really at the application layer. Andre, for you, you're focused on a lot of the SBTC stuff and how that can unlock growth in the ecosystem. I've enjoyed a lot of your recent posts on value accrual and so forth. So let me start here. I think with respect to the growth impacts of the SIP or the potential growth impacts of the SIP, what are the ones you think are going to be the most immediately impactful as you look at some of these things? Andre, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Mitchell. Yeah, so, I've been lucky over the past few years. I've gotten to wear a lot of hats in the Stacks ecosystem, really as a builder, first and foremost, starting with CityCoins, obviously, and then moving on to lead SBDC development. And so I think from that time, I've been able to see the ecosystem from a number of different perspectives. And so when I look at the SIP, there's a couple of things that are really exciting for me, both on the ecosystem growth side and on the core development side. So first on the ecosystem growth, I think really just looking at the way that the SIP is designed to accelerate the growth of the Stacks DeFi ecosystem, really bootstrap for some key protocols. So, the vast majority of funding in the SIP, or the majority of it is going to user acquisition and incentives. So really looking at how do we kind of bring new users into the ecosystem that can help to kind of sustain this ongoing growth of the network. We're looking at actually deploying capital into DeFi, so actually getting seed funding for ecosystem applications and really helping products kind of get kickstarted. I like the phrasing that Tycho gave in the last panel, going from 1 to 100, right? Where now we can really start to accelerate some of that growth. Looking at things from the partnerships perspective, so I get to contribute to the business development working group in Stacks, and a lot of the partnership deals that we're working on for really like key integrations for the Stacks ecosystem can be very capital intensive. And we want to be able to really kind of move quickly, close some deals that can help to unlock a lot of growth for the network. That includes everything from new bridges and stable coins, exchange support, and things like that. So really, there's a number of ways that the SIP is designed to go directly to supporting builders and fueling ecosystem growth from that perspective. And then on the core dev side, as a contributor to Bitcoin L2 Labs, I think this is really where I get excited for our ability to execute on our roadmap, where we've done a ton of work over the past few months to, work with the community to define the future of the Stacks network and our future roadmap. And it includes everything from making sure like some key upgrades to SBTC, making sure that SBTC is really the most secure, trust minimized way to use Bitcoin on chain, looking at ways that we can increase speeds for the Stacks network, developing new kind of yield products and deal staking as a way to kind of combine that with some value accrual for Stacks. So there's some really exciting things that we're looking at for the Stacks network development itself. And so last thing I'll say is that all of these things taken together make like a really interesting flywheel effect for the ecosystem, where each one of them is really important to provide sort of sustained growth for each other vertical. And yeah, looking forward to being able to unlock that together.
All right. Awesome. Well said. I'll go to the other two as well with the same question. What are the one things that, as you've read the SIP and sort of contributed along the way, that you are particularly excited about? And I'll ask you to just be like just slightly briefer than Andre, because I've got some other questions. Love you, buddy.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, but I think that was really well said. And I think just at a high level, this is a very exciting time for the whole Stacks ecosystem. It seems like it really feels like we've been fighting maybe with one hand behind our back, but now we can really go toe to toe with the leading blockchains and ecosystems out there. And we do require quite a bit of funding to do that. But the idea is that any sort of dilution or inflation that will result from this SIP will be greatly outweighed by the growth that we can see and generate through this new structure and this new fund that will go through all these various areas to instigate growth. A few for me that I think are interesting and exciting, and I think really will be very impactful to see more growth for Stacks. As Andre mentioned, user incentives and grants. So, ability to boost liquidity and encourage adoption for both new and existing apps that are building on Stacks. So we really want to encourage builders to come in, which in turn, they'll create applications that will be very interesting and enticing for users to come into the ecosystem. And so, as Andre mentioned, that can really kickstart a flywheel of growth. So another area as well I think is very interesting is providing funding for liquidity programs. Like especially in DeFi, we want to make sure we have the deepest pools of liquidity. We want to minimize slippage. We want to make sure that both small and larger users and holders are able to trade in and out of assets in a very efficient way. And so we need capital to kind of bootstrap a lot of these liquidity pools to make sure that we have efficient trading across all the top dexes and Stacks. And also, I think another key area is core development. I think we've seen a lot of interesting potential developments with the Satoshi upgrades. And I think a lot of that is trying to make sure Stacks is really the leader for the Bitcoin economy, not just for Bitcoin DeFi, which is definitely a key area that we want to be encouraging, but also, we want to bring in many other developers and other applications to come in, whether that's meme coins, NFTs, gaming, AI, infrastructure projects. There's so much green space that we can incentivize to create a really large and cohesive ecosystem to amplify that flywheel of growth.
You guys are loving the flywheels. I get it. I get it. All right. Sedzus, let's go to you.
Yeah, so I think in general, two things that, well, at a high level, what excites me is the fact that we are having a lot of momentum, especially with SBTC caps going the way they do. And we are not slowing down, but actually pressing that momentum further. So I think the timing of all these changes actually really excites me because, again, it shows that we're not doing one thing and kind of just stopping, but as we're accelerating, we're moving faster and faster and faster. So as a whole, that's what excites me about the SIP. Obviously, from the technical perspective, because clarity is my bread and butter, and the language I love the most. I am very biased towards the clarity changes happening, and specifically towards the clarity Bitcoin functions that hopefully make it through this SIP. So obviously, there's a lot of ways that we can read into the state of Bitcoin, and we have some smart contracts that Jude originally made and Friedger maintains that we use as a pseudo standard for how we read into the Bitcoin state. But having those be part of the native Clarity language is, to me, instrumental because it shows how close our tie-in to Bitcoin really is.
Great answer. You actually hit my next question as well, so doubly efficient. Thank you. I was really just going to ask, is there something that's near and dear to you that you expect to directly benefit from the SIP? So you got it there with clarity. Let's go to the next one. We're already running short on time. I could talk to you guys all day probably. I'm curious if you have any concerns about the SIP, or if there's one aspect of the SIP that builders may not realize right away, but that you think is important. Let's go to you first, Setsu, since you're already up.
Yeah, so in terms of, I think it's not necessarily, it's more cohesive and very comprehensive and everything involved. So I think this is a SIP that you have to pay attention to every single word that's written there. It's long, but because of its size, again, it's the right time to make a big move, especially when we have, again, the momentum that we're pressing down. I would say the size itself is something that I think just people should make an effort to get involved, have your comments, give us feedback. If you don't communicate with us, we don't necessarily know where to take these SIPs. So yeah, I would say if anything, that is one thing that it's not necessarily a native organic con, but I think it is something that people need to be aware of. Is there are a lot of moving parts to the SIP. So jump off the bench, jump off the tweets, and come comment on the Stacks forum.
Definitely jump right in there. The whole point of this process is to get feedback. So, Leo or Andre, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think just going off of Setsus's point, this is really a community-led effort. So, maybe we can be like shepherds of the SIP process, but we do really want to hear from every member of the community if they have any concerns about the SIP, and if there's anything in particular that we should be focused on or should be highlighting or perhaps even altering to make sure that everything's in the best interest of the community and all of the Stacks stakeholders at the end of the day. I think the big thing that I want people to understand is obviously there may be a concern around the inflation and the new tokenomics. And something I just want to highlight. So although there will be a short-term increase in inflation over the coming years, and I'm sure Alex mentioned this earlier in the conversation. Right now, the Stacks inflation rate is 3.52%. And according to this SIP, there will be an increase to an average of 5.75% over the next 5 years, which may sound a little bit steep. But if you look at all of our competing, blockchains and ecosystems that we're going up against, we did a lot of analysis about their tokenomics. And if you look at the inflation rates of the top 50 projects, the actual inflation rate is over 10%. Which, if you look at a project like Solana, which if you just look at the staking rewards, that's 5% annualized, but they also have big investor token unlocks. So the real effective inflation for Solana is actually 12%. So if you're looking at Stacks versus Solana, 5.75%, which is embedded in the SIP versus 12%, it's actually very reasonable. But it will also obviously unlock a lot of funding that we need to go to these critical areas to unlock growth.
That's a great point, Lior. And Andre, you're going to bring us home. The question was, any concerns or any specific thing inside the SIP that you think all builders should be aware of that they might not realize right away?
Yeah, I mean, so, I was one of the SIP authors, so I think a lot of my concerns have probably, been addressed along the way. But, I think from that role, I've been able to kind of work closely with, some of the teams that are doing the economics report in the SIP. That's been really important for me, seeing that we've been able to structure this in a way with clear lockups in mind, kind of minimizing volatility, kind of to the overall network. I think that is really helpful to address some of the points that Lior has mentioned. One of the things that I think maybe people might not fully realize, but it's in the SIP, is really just how efficient the ecosystem has been over the years. Like the Stacks ecosystem is a lot leaner than a lot of other projects that are out there. And we have, a killer BD working group in the ecosystem, killer folks that, work on marketing, and we've really been able to do a lot with a little to get to where we are now. Stacks has, great distribution on exchanges and things like that. And now it just feels like, to have the resources to really be able to add fuel to the fire and kind of like double down on that growth where we've been able to run up a lead in the Bitcoin L2 ecosystem. SBDC is growing quickly while a lot of L2s still haven't come to mainnet yet. And so I just think that now is the time to double down on that growth and see us be able to accelerate and continue to press on that moving forward.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Unfortunately, I got to get you out and speed run my next session and get folks out of here and into the Q&A. For everyone listening, we're going to go a little bit over. We invite you to stay tuned. Appreciate it. Pretty exciting time for Stack. So I want to make sure we hear from everybody. See you in just a minute.
Thanks, Mitchell.
All right, everybody. This is the last time you have to hear from me today. Appreciate it. It's been an exciting day hearing from a lot of folks, but I also wanted to take a minute and kind of share my own personal perspective. I've been with the Stacks Foundation a long time, Blockstack before that. And in February, I actually wrote a post about a lot of the things that I believe the ecosystem needed to invest in more deeply. That covered a wide range of topics from BD, marketing, finalizing the roadmap, looking ahead at some of what became the Satoshi upgrades that Munib and others have talked about today. And since then, a lot of illuminating posts and work and all that has been done. Things like the roadmap came out, deep dives on some of these papers, and amazing DeFi growth plan from Tico and from Rena, and even kind of sharing Stacks' opinion on value accrual and the growth flywheels that Andre and Lior were getting at. So pretty encouraging to see a lot of those things already getting addressed. And now with the SIP, having a plan and being able to pair that with the capital and the vehicle to deliver on it. As someone who sort of faced a lot of the friction points with my team on the original setup of the ecosystem, I just wanted to be direct in that I really support this proposal. I think it solves all of the kind of core things that slow us down. And as Andre mentioned, we've still managed to be very efficient and do a lot with a small, group and sort of the decentralization in the way that we had structured it. But there's no reason not to adapt to the current environment. We've learned a lot over the last 6 years, the legal compliance, the competition, everything about the environment around us has changed. And so I think one of the best ways I can sort of highlight why I'm excited about the SIP for all of you in a way that may or may not be obvious is to sort of reflect on some of the some examples of friction that we faced. You know, when news gets delivered, often the whole story of sort of how it got there, you know, is lost, right? And that's totally natural. So I want to just quickly reflect on a few things that I think will drive this home, that this SIP and many of the contributions I made to the SIP directly, you know, attack. So, number one, these sort of like friction points and pain points and slowdowns, they range from simple to really complex. And so a good example on the simple end would be something like the BD working group. Done a phenomenal job onboarding, you know, hundreds of partners this year, the signer network, which the foundation supported. But as you dive into that work actually getting done, the structure makes interesting questions, right? Like that people may not realize, where we can't even really have a proper CRM as an ecosystem because the working group's made up of 4 different people, 5 different people, 10 different people, whatever it is, from potentially as many organizations, right? And so then you have an NDA with one party, but not with the others. What information can you share? And I think you can pretty quickly see how stuff gets complicated as we try to work with people, respect partners, follow rules and laws across orgs where we are collaborating in these, you know, these working groups or these other sort of informal community mechanisms. So that's one thing that I think the consolidation of, you know, key operational functions will help with a lot. The other major category, and there are several, again, I'll try to move fast. There's just limitations on what funds can be spent on for various reasons, right? For us, there were entire categories of grants that were off limits or a gray area, or just given our history in relation to the Stacks token, something that was not advised to do. A good example I'll come to is our team loves the meme coin community, and we're just not able to get comfortable with a lot of direct support of that community and some of those assets and things. So this is my shout out to Welsh and Not and the others, but it's just another good example of where we've seen other ecosystems and the structure that they have enable them to support communities like that, and where I think this SIP will allow the Stacks contributors and the wider resources to be applied in a much more flexible way. The others are sort of obvious and were covered today, so I'll kind of move through those, but really things like a centralized marketing play, especially when it touches the Stacks asset or token. I'm pretty proud of the fact that Stacks is so widely listed and supported. That's something that my team did in the early days of the Stacks Foundation. But as you look ahead for SBTC listings and TGEs for the ecosystem, the faster and easier we can make that by making our ecosystem easier to work with for those partners and to be able to apply capital in ways that are not as limited is going to make it much easier to move faster for SBTC. I also mentioned the CMO already, so I'll skip that. I think, again, being able to have sort of a global marketing strategy that can touch everything from the token to KOLs to all the things that we know work to help bootstrap these flywheels in crypto, but that either people can only touch in limited ways currently or cannot touch at all is a really exciting unlock. Lior said it on the last session, but I think in a lot of ways, the Stacks ecosystem has done what it's done with one arm tied behind its back. And sometimes it feels like 2. And for the people who like me and my team and all the contributors you've heard from today, it's frustrating to show up every day and kind of live your life to support builders and the community and not be able to touch all the things that you would like to. So last but not least, just capital, right? This is pretty simple. Relatively speaking, Stacks raised very little a long time ago. You know, and importantly here that this hasn't been mentioned today, I think that the mission, like all of us that are here may take this for granted, but the mission that we've taken on and decided to move ahead on is much bigger than it was when we started out, right? The cost to bootstrap DeFi and the Bitcoin economy is much greater, and there's more competition as well. And so I think that the treasury solves that, or the endowment rather solves that by putting the funds in the right vehicle to be spent at the right time. at least not orders of magnitude different than our competition or than the projects and ecosystems ahead of us. So, and then last but not least, this is my last pain point, and I'll wrap this up and get to my friend Kyle for the conclusion and then the Q&A. But one of the other things that you face is just a whole list of things that are unclear when you operate in the US. And Alex has talked about this at more length. I highly recommend his address to the US House of Financial Services. I won't bore you with all the details, but the sum total of it is, in general, we end up with sort of complicated risk assessments with really no clear answers and often a moving target when it comes to risk. I like that the Treasury or the SIP proposes things that directly sort of offset those risks and allow these contributors to move more freely and flexibly. So I think in the post-SIP world, we can live in one where the capital and the vehicle are aligned. And I don't want to treat it too much like a magic wand, but I think it might be close. A lot of the changes are going directly into sort of a well-understood structure, best practices. And I'll close with this. I see Sean coming up with Hero Gamer. Excited to see you guys. But my ask to the new endowment and the new entities, should the SIP get approved, is very simple. I would really like to see the commitment to efficiency remain. I loved seeing the budget. I think that makes a ton of sense. But the majority of this funding should and needs to go to builders and ecosystem benefiting programs. Over the years, we have learned how to deliver on that in a very lean way. And I'm excited. My team is excited to help these teams get booted up and do the same, remain very efficient, and not just spend money because we have it, but spend money in the most effective ways. We're able to become one of the top 7 fastest growing ecosystems in DevRel with a smaller budget. So there's room for both more firepower, but also continued creativity and continued efficiency. And so excited to help out with all the things we've benefited from and learned over the years. And thank you. This is going to be sort of Stacks Reloaded. It's fuel for growth in front of us and probably a quantum leap for the project. With that, I'm excited to turn things over to 2 of our incredible community members, Sean Longstreet and Hero Gamer. They've got some more sentiment to share from the grassroots. I'll kick it over to you guys. Thanks for being here.
Hello, my name is Sean Longstreet, and I'm the community content lead for Leather Wallet, a partner artist with Gamma.io, and the producer of the weekly Leather Lounge podcast. And I'm excited to be presenting some thoughts and sentiment from the ecosystem and community today. The Stacks community is very diverse. Some are here for DeFi, to build, others for communities and meme coins, and others for the promise of a thriving creator economy. This diversity is reflected in the range of perspectives that we're seeing, from longtime OGs in the space to newcomers, builders, and thought leaders. Over the past several months, there's been a noticeable vibe shift across the community, and if I were to sum up the community sentiment in one word, it would be bullish. We're going to take a look at some tweets to better understand and unpack what the community has been expressing. First, with a tweet from mysterycyborg.btc, who shared that several OGs in the Stacks community with over 4 years of experience said they've never felt more excited by the surge and growth in Stacks after the Nakamoto upgrade and the launch of SBTC. People are excited because Stacks is secured by the hash power of Bitcoin, that Stacks is setting the foundation for the new internet that's being built, that it's not just a network, it's the foundation for a new Bitcoin economy, an economy where Bitcoin becomes programmable, expanding its use beyond just being a store of value, because Bitcoin was always meant to do more than just sit there. I've been watching this space for a while, and this roadmap feels like the moment where potential turns to progress. Here's one of my favorites from the advisor. Stacks will win so much, you'll beg Munib to stop winning. And Munib will say, no, we have to keep winning. We have to win more. I asked the advisor to follow up with some more feedback, and he said, I love the new direction as Stacks is positioning itself to become the railways of the Bitcoin economy. A few examples of this are dual staking and paying fees with SBTC. On top of that, they are taking on the right initiatives to boost integrations, DeFi liquidity, and much more. No concerns as long as we ship fast enough. As usual, the community is the backbone of any project, and they will become increasingly important in increasing awareness and mindshare and educating people. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to a real hero in the community, and that is Hero Gamer.
All right. Hi, Stacks community. I'm Hero Gamer, and I'm the Ecosystem Governance Program Coordinator and the host of Weekly SIPCO. So I lead up the governance and coordination efforts around the Stacks improvement proposal, and which you've heard multiple times today. So I'm here to share a little bit more insight coming from the CAPs. So just a quick reminder, what are the CAPs? For those who just joined Stacks, I know there are many of you. CAP stands for Consideration Advisory Board, and there are group of subject matter experts who play a critical role in the SIP process. And there are 3 CAPs: technical CAP, governance CAP, and economics CAP. And their role is to carefully review, vet, and provide feedback within their area of expertise to help make SIPs clearer and more robust and better aligned with the ecosystem need. They also conduct internal votes, signaling approval or requesting additional revision from the SIP authors. As for the SIP 31 that's being announced today, given its wide-reaching impact across the ecosystem, we're actively engaging with the CAP members early to gather their input and to ensure the SIP proposal is carefully reviewed and before it gets progressed further. So just a quick post check from the CAP members. So we have Adam for Alex and Leo Stack and DAO. They'll express enthusiasm about Stack's roadmap. As for the endowment SIP 31 itself, here is some early feedback from Matty Tokenomics. And if I may summarize for Matty Tokenomics raised some very thoughtful questions around inflation, strategic focus, and organizational clarity. Helpful reminder for us to stay grounded in transparency and measurable outcome as we structure the endowment. And let's do a quick post check on governance cap. So governance cap members were also excited by the roadmap, like everybody else, such as Peace Love from the organized media and XY0.BTC from Zero Authority DAO. But with regard to the endowment SIP itself, we received some high-level early feedback from Peace Love, who just joined the governance cap 2 months ago. Peace Love said the Stacks endowment could really be a very powerful catalyst for the ecosystem, though it is important to continue the open conversation around the structure and to drive the best long-term impact and to ensure the funds are directed openly and fairly. So you can see each of the cap really look at from their lens of the expertise. So overall, I would just summarize the cap's sentiments are positive and the roadmap looks solid. And as for the SIP itself, CAPS plans to dive into the detail over the coming days, just as you see more details from the SIP author. And if you're curious about the SIP process, I host a weekly SIP call on the Organized Media live stream. So everybody is welcome to join the conversation and discuss the SIP with us every Friday at 10:30 a.m. ET. And just like the earlier speaker, Zeus, Andre, and Leo said, I really highly recommend everybody to think about the SIP, read the SIP, think about it critically, provide constructive feedback, and this is the way to make yourself heard. And I cannot stress how important it is over the coming days. This is your way to get your voice in. And we are an open ecosystem, very neutral, and everybody is willing to listen to you.
Yes, one thing that truly sets Stacks apart is its community. There are builders, leaders, and advocates who have been here for years, building through the bear, keeping the energy alive, and pushing the ecosystem forward. And while it would be impossible to name everyone, we do want to take a moment and give a special shout out and flowers to some of the most prominent builders and creators: Peace Love, GPSC from Deorganized Media, Jackman Switch, Rafa, Dan Trevino, Algorithm, Trippin' Monkey, Mr. Wagme, Rosar, and Melanie Karstens. This community is more than just passionate, it's deeply aligned with the ethos and the principles of Stacks. And with that kind of dedication, passion, and momentum, there's tremendous excitement for the future of Stacks.
What an exciting moment in the history of the Stacks ecosystem and a major milestone moment for the entire Bitcoin industry. Appreciate all of the builders, contributors, and some of the OGs who have been a part of the Stacks ecosystem and taking the time today on the special edition of our town hall to share their thinking, their reflection, and what they see this proposal, this draft SIP creating momentum for Stacks and for the greater Bitcoin economy. As all of our speakers talked about, what is possible when this SIP comes to light will do so much for the greater Bitcoin economy. Imagine what Stacks can do without one arm behind its back and a treasury that isn't less than those who sits across the industry. We owe it to ourselves putting this ecosystem in the exciting position because of the work that has been done across all areas of the ecosystem, including each and every one of you in the community and all that you have given to see this ecosystem, the many projects, the many applications, the many developers continue to grow and thrive over the years. Join us in this moment of history for the Stacks and the greater Bitcoin ecosystem. And as a reminder, this is a draft. We welcome feedback from each and every one of you. If you have questions, if you have comments, feel free to drop it in the Twitter thread here that this stream is on as well. Please express your thoughts for consideration and general discussion as has been discussed today. I invite each and every one of you to join the Q&A and AMA session that we're going to host on Twitter Spaces here in just a moment. For those that can't join, the SIP is live at stx.is/growth-SIP. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott of the Stacks Asia Foundation, and I'll see you on the other side at the Stacks AMA. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.